Hi, everybody. I'm Phil Bliss, founder and CEO of Canada's Entrepreneur, and I'm coming to you today from Toronto. Dr. Chika Oriuwa, whose new memoir, Unlike the Rest, was recently published by HarperCollins in Canada, is our guest today. Dr. Oriuwa is a child of Nigerian immigrants to Canada who experienced many challenges, including racism, sexism, and financial precarity on her way to realizing her dream of becoming a doctor. Upon arriving at medical school, she discovered she was the only person of color in a class of over 300 students. This inspired her to become an entrepreneur of her own life and career and led her to become a cultural icon whose story resonates globally now. Dr. Oriuwa has been recognized internationally for her accomplishments and was named one of Time magazine's Next Generation Leaders in 2021 and was honored with one-of-a-kind Barbie doll for her contributions as a frontline healthcare worker. Dr. Oriuwa is her accomplishments exemplify the potential of women who harness their power to break barriers and inspire others. She's currently touring North America with a keynote, sharing her blueprint for innovation, a neuroscience-driven three-pillar framework to revolutionize leadership and organizational success on both an individual and an organization level for lasting impact, from boardrooms to the psychiatric emergency room and from billion-dollar problems to toddler meltdowns. Dr. Oriuwa is combining storytelling, science, and strategy to unlock entrepreneurial integrity at home or in the boardroom. So, Chika, welcome to Canada's Entrepreneur. And before we get deeper, let's find out a bit more about you and your interesting life and entrepreneurial journey. How about a 4 or 5 minute journey summary to kick things off?
Absolutely. So, firstly, I want to say thank you so much for hosting me on your podcast. It's an honor. And, my journey really started, I guess, like many individuals might say this who are physicians, that, that they've always wanted to be a doctor. And I certainly consider myself to be a part of that camp. I had desires to pursue medicine when I was 3 years old. My parents said that I, just naturally gravitated towards that career. And I just, proclaimed to the world that I wanted to be a doctor. And that was long before I had any concept of what medicine actually entailed. What I would say that was kind of unique about me as a kid is that I also had desires to want to be a writer as well as a public speaker. And so in my childhood, I was fascinated by sciences, by biology, by chemistry, by math. I absolutely loved all of the sciences, but I was also quite skilled as well in writing and language arts and poetry, in theater and performance. Like I really loved um, kind of being on stage and being in front of crowds and speaking to individuals. And so I got into public speaking competitions quite early and really just, found a way to kind of blend these two worlds that were kind of historically seen as, quite
Hmm.
dichotomized, medicine
Yeah.
and arts and language and things of that nature. But I do consider myself fortunate that now my career is an illustration of that marriage between the sciences and the arts. And then, after elementary school, I went through high school. My undergrad was at McMaster University in the Health Sciences Honors Program, and which is, a pretty well-known pre-medical program. And so a lot of individuals from that program end up going into medical school. And I went to medical school at the University of Toronto, Faculty of Medicine. I started it in 2016, graduated in 2020. And I'm currently completing my residency in psychiatry with aims to complete a fellowship in neuropsychiatry / brain medicine, sleep medicine, that kind of deal. And so
Mm,
my entrepreneurial journey is kind of interwoven into that journey, you could say,
mm,
because what it really looks like for me is that I am a public speaker, I'm a professional speaker, as well as a writer. And those two things are quite separate, in some ways related to my world in medicine. And even as we had mentioned before, when we were chatting earlier, that medicine in and of itself really is an entrepreneurial endeavor. Many of us go on to independently practice in the community and have to run many businesses ourselves. And so there's many hats of entrepreneurial pursuits that I wear. But certainly in my role as an author, I published my first book, which was a memoir entitled Unlike the Rest, A Doctor's Story. That came out with HarperCollins in 2024. And then my life as a public speaker has spanned in the last 10 years. And that one, I think, is probably the most pure embodiment of my entrepreneurial efforts, given that it really is me hustling, putting myself out there, working with my incredible speakers bureau and agents, and really having this whole ecosystem around my public speaking that involves so many different moving parts, so many different individuals, but kind of culminates with me getting to do national and international keynotes and having to travel a lot in order to be, quite a successful keynote speaker and have that as a parallel career to my life in medicine and my life in writing. And so
mm.
it's been quite an untraditional journey for a doctor, and maybe even an entrepreneur, but it's one that I am so incredibly proud of.
Well, what makes it so special for you? And what do you think, you bring to your audiences, I guess, patients, readers,
Mhm.
other entrepreneurs? What makes it so special?
I think what makes me so unique as an entrepreneur and unique as a public speaker is that I think I have found a really beautiful way to blend in all of the different aspects into my life, and I bring them to the stage. And so my signature keynote at this time talks about the neuroscience of innovation and leadership. And what I love is that I've developed this blueprint that talks about how we can leverage neuroscience to prime our minds to be more innovative, to ignite it in others, and to harmonize our collective ingenuity. But what I love about that is that I get to bring in what I've learned as a psychiatry resident doctor and really infuse medicine into that, especially through the neuroscience. But then I also get to bring in my love for performance, of course, being on stage naturally, but also as a spoken word poet. And so I get to perform elements of poetry throughout the presentation, and audiences really get to see how I'm able to blend that creativity with that critical thinking, with that curiosity, and they get to be entertained as well as educated and informed. And, rarely do I leave a keynote without someone coming and telling me that that was unlike any other keynote presentation that I've seen, or, that they were just truly inspired or awestricken by the presentation. And so I think that being able to bring these really unique elements forward as a public speaker is what makes me quite unique as an entrepreneur. And then, of course, in the other elements, being a doctor who also has this whole other life outside of medicine, therein makes me unique. And then, of course, being a writer and being an author who also juggles all these other hats. I also would
So,
put the huge caveat that I'm also a mom of two. So I have two toddlers and I'm pregnant with my third. So
yeah,
it's a lot.
I was going to say, what made you decide to really just go this route, and how the heck do you manage to go to market successfully with, basically quite different? I mean, there's some overlap, but different focus, basically. Everyone says focus, 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 and you've got these two things running. I mean, there's, as I said, a little bit of overlap, but they're not exactly the same thing. They're not,
I'd say what made me decide, it wasn't even really a decision. It was just necessary and organic for me. as I mentioned, as a child, I wanted all of these things. I wanted to be a poet. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a doctor. And I felt like at certain points in my life, especially when I was in medical school, that I was needing to forfeit certain elements of my constitution of who I was. And so when I was in medicine and medical school, and all of my energy and all of my focus was going towards studying medicine, there was that intense desire, that craving, that longing for me to pick back up the pen and start writing my poetry and going back to, open mic nights and competitive slam poetry and writing. Like all of that just felt so necessary, that when I was presented with the opportunity again to pick back up public speaking when I was in medical school, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Felt like I could finally exhale and breathe again. And I think being able to have this balance between my life as a doctor, my life as a writer, my life as a public speaker, that is what makes me feel whole. And so that's why I think it was just such a necessary move on my end to find a way to configure all of these different elements of my life. And with respect to why I have been quite successful in doing all of these things, is because I do think that I'm a little bit of a unicorn with respect to the niche that I occupy. Being able to be a public speaker who is also a doctor, who is also an artist, who is also engaging on stage. All of these things can be quite unique in that space. And so that's why I think I've excelled within that area. And it's just something that for me is as seamless and as organic as breathing when I'm on stage. Like I truly don't get that much stage fright. And I feel so natural when I'm on the stage in front of a room of a few hundred to even several thousand. It feels like home. So I think that's why it's been quite a successful endeavor for me so far.
What are you most excited about in your work, at the moment?
I maybe answer that in a few parts. With respect to my public speaking, as I mentioned, I just launched this new signature keynote where I get to talk a lot about the neuroscience of innovation and leadership.
Mhm.
And it is just so exciting to me to get on stage and be able to bring all the different worlds of my life together. And that's just been within the last year. And so I'm still quite excited to talk about this blueprint. I'm quite excited to
Mhm.
educate the audiences on it. But within the world of medicine, I'm finishing up my degree or my residency training in psychiatry, and I'm really excited to pursue a fellowship in brain medicine. I think it's fascinating. I think it's so timely, and I think that especially at this unique inflection point where we're in this great era of social disconnection, rapidly advancing technology, I think there's a lot of concerns about what it means to retain our humanity and what it means to be deeply human and deeply connected. And so I do find it really relevant, timely, and exciting to be in this area of medicine that at its core is all about our humanity and the human experience and being able to just explore and understand that further, especially as we, wade into quite uncertain waters with respect to the future and technology and AI.
Let's move on to some challenges. I mean, what's been the greatest challenge you've faced in your entrepreneurial life to date?
I would say the greatest challenge that I have faced as an entrepreneur has been rebranding. And the reason why I say that is because my journey as a public speaker, it's kind of been an evolution throughout my life, but it really took off when I was in medical school. And that was predicated on my narrative of being a Black medical student, the only Black medical student at the University of Toronto in my year, the class that started in 2016. And so I spent a lot of time sharing my story. And that's where I would say that a lot of individuals, at least at that time, took a lot of interest. And what makes that challenging is that the story was based in what was quite a traumatic experience. And what I felt that individuals at times found the most interesting were the details of my trauma. And so when I would do a lot of public speaking, I would share a lot of myself and talk a lot about that. And it reached a point where, although I really did advocate quite strongly and still do advocate quite strongly for diversity, equity, and inclusion, I also wanted to be seen and respected in the world as a public speaker outside of that topic as well. So if I'm still, if people ask me, if clients say specifically, we want you to speak on this, I'm happy to. But I found that quite often women, especially Black women, minority communities, they often get pigeonholed, or they only get tapped on the shoulder to speak on certain topics, even if you're a doctor, right? And I had 3 degrees in science. I hold a master's in innovation and leadership. And so there was so much knowledge that I wanted to share with the world. But I found that making that pivot as a public speaker, and as a brand, from being someone who spoke mostly on equity and inclusion to someone who now wanted to share my other insights and talents with the world, that was a really hard pivot. And I'm very fortunate such that my Speakers Bureau, Speaker Spotlight, they were behind me 110%, and they supported me heavily. But still, that uptake, that perspective shifting, to the world, it can take a little bit of time. But I am fortunate now that that has really shifted, and so my signature keynote has shifted as well.
So what do you see as the biggest challenge, moving ahead with these sort of parallel careers, if you like?
I'd say truly striking that balance is probably the hardest part of moving forward with both careers, because public speaking as a career it's an incredible career, but it can also be quite volatile in terms of the number of keynotes that you get, or even where they are, the clients that are interested in you, or the things that are topical and timely. And we see that, right, in the same way that the markets react to different geopolitical situations. The same is very true when it comes to what people are interested in hearing about with respect to public speakers. And so, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there was much more of an appetite for us to have conversations around inclusivity and have conversations around certain narratives. Whereas now the pendulum has kind of swung, and there is a different kind of appetite. There's more of an appetite around leadership. There's more of an appetite around, if people have a wealth of political knowledge and they can speak on things like tariffs and the economy on a global scale, then that is something that is timely and relevant. Or someone has a lot of knowledge around AI right now, that is timely, that is relevant. And so your lifetime as a speaker, you can be a speaker for a very long time, but there might be moments and pockets in which people want to hear your voice more, and less, and clients might want to hear it less. And so I think the challenge for me is being able to have a broad repertoire, which I'm really striving for. So being able to speak on diversity, equity, and inclusion, still finding ways to thread it into my keynotes even now, but being able to speak on that. And then now being able to speak to the neuroscience of innovation. As a psychiatrist in the future, I'll be able to have more robust keynotes specifically around, mental health, or different elements or aspects of mental health. So keeping your repertoire broad is important as a speaker, but can also be really challenging, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to perfect a keynote. It takes a lot of time to do that. And then, of course, being in medicine, which, depending on the area of medicine, you can have certain flexibilities, or it can be quite, you could be beholden to a hospital, and you might have to be there for a certain number of hours in a day, in a week. You might have research commitments, you might have call commitments. And so that can make it challenging to be able to pick up different keynotes, or to make keynote commitments where you're traveling halfway across the continent or halfway across the world, and you need to be gone for 3 or 4 days. And that can be really hard to, find coverage and figure out how to balance that career with another career. And so that's something that of course, for me, will always be in evolution, and I'm finding different ways to work around that, as well as being a mother, which is my number one priority, and having small children just makes it all the more kind of complicated and chaotic. But when that balance is struck, it's a really beautiful thing.
You're thinking about diversity and equity and inclusion. You know, you're a black woman, an immigrant and a success. What
Mhm.
advice would you give, you know, entrepreneurs that may be in a similar situation, looking to start a business, basically?
Sure. So I would say there's one minor correction. So I'm actually born here in Canada. I'm the
Okay,
daughter.
okay, all right.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no, no,
sorry.
that's okay.
That's okay.
Um,
That's okay.
yeah, I'm the daughter of Nigerian immigrants, so I'm second
Mm,
generation Canadian,
okay.
which comes with its own challenges for sure. So I can speak to that. Being that my parents came from Nigeria to Canada in the 80s. They actually met here in Quebec, and
Mm,
they then started a family. But my mom worked as a personal support worker and still does, and my dad worked in the pharmaceutical industry as a pharmaceutical technician, and then also as a part-time PRN. And so, fairly, I guess you could say middle class, but we definitely had our financial struggles growing up and still do. And I think with the burden of being a child of immigrants comes, there's a beautiful element to it. And I absolutely, I have so much adoration for my parents and all the sacrifices that they've made, how hard they've worked, how they've infused that work ethic into me and my siblings. And at the same time, there can be the challenges of having incredibly high expectations to meet because of the degree of the sacrifices that they've made, as well as recognizing that when you are in the position where you might be out earning your parents, or there's the expectation to reach a certain point of success such that you can in turn support your parents, whereas I find that narrative can be quite the reverse, or there's a role reversal for a lot of my friends whose parents weren't immigrants or who aren't immigrants themselves, or things of that nature, where it's like, oh, like my parents were able to pay for my school, and there's an inheritance waiting for me. And, that, like, my parents have been financially supporting me and vice versa. So I feel like that challenge in and of itself can really influence the entrepreneurial journey. In some
mm,
ways, it can really drive it because there's a lot of expectation and there's a lot of familial obligation. And so you feel this, and I certainly feel this drive that I have to work as hard as I can possibly work so that I can support myself, my children, leave a legacy for my kids, but then also in turn support my parents and other, individuals in my family who might need that support. And so that kind of double-edged sword can be a really difficult thing because there's a lot of pressure on you to get it right and to not mess it up. So that's what can make it really challenging. But I also think I can't. I would be remiss to not acknowledge the certain challenges that come with trying to break into the entrepreneurial world as a Black woman, or even breaking into the world of medicine as a Black woman and having your voice respected. It can be challenging. It can certainly be challenging. I think I would be remiss to not acknowledge the realities of racism, of systemic racism, of
yeah.
sexism. All of these things are real. And I think that, and I wrote actually quite a lot about this in my memoir, Unlike the Rest, that in the earliest, days and years of my medical training, it was something that I really had to contend with, that really had a profound psychological impact on me. And I credit my dedication to going to therapy to being something that really saved me, as a medical student and also as an entrepreneur, because it was necessary for me to be able to process and unpack the trauma that I was experiencing such that I would be able to move forward and not be necessarily stifled by it. So there's
Yeah.
a lot that goes into that journey.
Yeah. That's good. Well, what's the best piece of advice that you've received that kind of, you know, uh, it's just there all the time. You know, maybe it's in your back pocket or something like that.
Mm.
Is there something, some strong piece of advice that you kind of carry around with you?
Oh man, there's so many pieces of advice that I
Yeah, yeah. But think of one.
yeah, yeah, no, I'm trying to think of what is the most resonant. I think for me, the power of a village is so important. The power of a community is so important.
Yeah,
And I don't think I would have, I know I would not have come nearly as far in my life, in my career, in my entrepreneurial pursuits, were it not for the community that I have truly leaned on. And I think that for me has taken different forms throughout this journey. So when I was in medical school, going through the challenges of medicine,
yeah.
being able to have a community of mentors around me was so important. Therapists are part of that community, family, friends. And I think one of the most important things that I've learned is recognizing when you are in need of help and being vulnerable enough to ask for that help. And that can look like, getting mental health help, or for me in the recent years of my life, being a mother to two young children and now pregnant with my third, and juggling all of these different entrepreneurial endeavors is recognizing that I cannot do it by myself. I cannot be superwoman. It is going to be impossible. I need to call my friends and family. Sometimes I need someone to drop off a meal or pick up my kids from school. Or, we recently hired an incredible nanny. Her name is Allison, and I don't know how I would survive without her. But being able to do these things in a guilt-free way, because the expectation for women, especially moms, especially who go back to their career and are expected to juggle everything, is a really damaging expectation.
So let's that's some serious stuff we just talked about for the last 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's have some three or four fun things at the end
Okay.
of this. Um, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing instead?
Oh my goodness. That's a hard question because I feel like I'm doing
I
everything
know, yeah,
I
but from
love.
what you were saying, this is what you wanted to do all your life, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like I'm doing everything that I love. Um, because
It's okay.
if I wasn't doing medicine, I would be doing public speaking full time.
So
And
we're fine. It's interesting. That's
yeah,
good. That's
yeah.
great. That you've got two paths that you love. It's special.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
Fun one. Are you a morning or a night person? I suspect a morning person with two kids. You know.
I am a morning person, but I've always been a morning person. I have
Yeah.
never been the kind of person who thrives at 3 a.m. I love getting up at 6 a.m. and have been that way since elementary school.
Okay. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be, and why would you choose it?
Oof. Hmm. If I had to pick one word to describe myself, I think I would describe myself as someone who is graceful. And why I chose that word is because I think most recently in the last few years of my life, I have understood what it means to extend grace to other individuals,
Mhm.
especially individuals who might be struggling in their life, but also what it means to extend grace to myself. And I think that all of the other virtues that I possess, they kind of, extend outwards from my ability to hold grace for others and hold grace for myself. I think that's what makes me a good friend. I think that's what makes me a really good doctor. I think that's what makes me the best mother that I can be. Like, I can love my children in such a different and wholesome way than I ever could have, before doing all the healing that I've done. But that is predicated on first being able to heal whatever wounds I had, loving myself fully. And then that is the foundation of grace that has allowed me to give grace and love to others.
So, final question. Uh,
Mhm.
apart from the kids, what's keeping you up at night these days?
Oh goodness, leaving a legacy. I think that's what keeps me up a lot at night. I am so afraid of wasted potential, and maybe that's why I do so many different things. But I am so dedicated to leaving a legacy, both professionally, but also personally. Like I want my children and my family to never go without. I want them to understand the path that has been, tread for them, and I want to be able to just leave this world a better place than where I came, or what it was when I entered it. And so I think just wanting to do the absolute best I can with the resources that I have and to the best of my potential is literally what keeps me up at night.
Chika, it's been great meeting you and great having you on Canada's Entrepreneur. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it was great to meet Chika, and that was really different and extremely interesting. It's not often that we meet a doctor, author, and public speaker, and mom, of course. Really, we can accomplish so much with the right drive and enthusiasm for the best results. I'm Phil Bliss. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter on our website and subscribe on your YouTube as well as on any of the other major podcast channels. Thanks for listening to Canada's Entrepreneur, where you meet the entrepreneurs that drive Canada's economy. I'll see you soon.